Hello and welcome to this Sage X3 webinar on Shipments and Landing Costing. In this session, we're going to see how to deal with overseas supply, looking at the logistical aspects as well as the financial aspects. As with any replenishment, we are going to start with purchase orders to our suppliers. As the orders are ready, we're going to get shipment information and potentially container information. We'll also get details about the transport itself, the air or sea voyage number, the departure date, the expected arrival date. Later, we'll receive our shipment or do a pre-receipt. And finally, we'll look at processing invoices. The bottom part of my process flow covers the setup needed to automate our landed costing, and we'll see that as well. Let's start with a look at products. So I'm going to go to the supply section. Here I've got a couple of supplies for this particular product. But what's important in this area is the landed cost section, where I have a number of different methods, whether I can apply a straight percentage or coefficient, a fixed cost per unit, or what we're going to see today in more details is using a cost structure. If I have a look at this cost structure, I see a collection of different cost elements that are going to participate into my landed costing. So it could be sea freight, insurance, local delivery. In this table as well, I have the inner workings of my landed costing. Whether it's going to be a percentage or a charge in my local currency or in a foreign currency as well. If I go a little bit deeper and I go into the costs, and I'll have a look at insurance, for instance. So this is the description of all the costs that are going to participate and how I'm going to, the way they're going to function. So this one is a very simple one. It's a percentage. It's active. There's a consideration about the exchange rate that I'm going to use and also whether or not I want this to participate to the actual landed cost, or if it's going to be a charge outside of my landed costing. Let's have a look at another charge. Here's another example. You can see that there's different methods here. Aside from the percentage, it could be a fixed amount for each line. It could be an amount per unit, so multiplied by the quantity, a schedule or brackets, a weighted amount. We'll have a look at that in a minute. Or I could even use a formula. So quite a lot of flexibility here. One thing that we see here grayed out is all the charges at this stage are per product. So there is a plan to expand that to the order or shipment level, but that's not here yet. So having it at product is fine when it's a rate per kilo or cubic meter, such as a charge for less than container load or a percentage. But it's not ideal when it's a fee for an entire order or an entire shipment. For example, a processing fee or a total container charge. The way around this at this stage is to bring it down per kilo or per cubic meter and to use the weighing amount, which I'll show in a minute. Remember that this landed costing is to establish a budget. It doesn't have to be 100% exact. This will allow you to receipt your shipment ahead of getting the freight forwarders charges and start selling the stock with a close to accurate margin. Later, when you process the actual charges, the system will recalculate all costs retroactively to give true margins. Let's return to our cost structure. And what I also wanted to mention here is the weighing factor. So this is me saying we're going to calculate the sea freight for the total container line by having a rate of 30 US dollars, per cubic meter, which is an approximation. And here I'm going to say I'm going to fill that container at 85%, just to have a little buffer for my calculations here. The last thing that I wanted to mention is Incoterms. So if I go into my supplier here, take this one, jump into the supplier. So the supplier information also plays a role. So first of all, I've got the currency in which I'm going to be ordering from my supplier. And further down, I have the Incoterms. So these are the conditions to define what is going to be paid and by whom. So if I go into the cost and freight, it describes all the main categories of charges, and the responsibility for paying these charges is described here. So in the case of cost and freight, the seller is going to take all these charges until it's loaded, and then the buyer is going to take care of the rest. Let's have a look at Xworks, for instance. So the seller is going to do packing, but this being Xworks, the following charges are going to be the responsibility of the buyer. Now that we know all that, we can proceed with our purchasing. So here I've got a purchase order. I'll take this one as an example. Actually, this one is my supplier, Shanghai Eagle Industrial. It's an overseas supplier. I've got the Incoterms that I copied into the purchase order, the currency, of course. I've got a couple of lines on that purchase order. The system is going to calculate my total weight and total volume, and that's going to be handy for the determining the type of container that I'm going to need. This information is also available in MRP. So here I'm entering a purchase order manually, but if I was asking the system to suggest purchase orders, the selection offered by material requirements planning would also calculate a total volume. So combining multiple purchase orders together, and I would know how many containers I need. The other thing that the system has done is already at the purchase order level. If I go into the details, I have here an item called cost structure details. So it's already started calculating the future landed costs using the table that we saw before. You can see that the first two lines have no charges, and that is because of my Incoterm. This is the responsibility of the supplier, so I won't have to pay that. And then the system started calculating the charges, and we can see the elements that it used. I can see my 85% fill rate on my container, and here I can see the charges. So that's the charge in the currency defined in my cost structure, and that's converted into Australian dollars. At the bottom of the order, I've got a calculation, or I've got a table that shows me in the foreign currency and in my local currency the impact of these landed costs calculations on the entire order. So I already know that I'm buying something for $369,000, but it's going to cost me $393. Again, this is a budget that will allow a receipt prior to getting the information from my freight forwarders. And if I want the detail, I've got total cost, by nature. So these are major families. So I can see that at the moment I'm paying close to 2,000 US dollars in sea freight. And then the rest is calculated here. Some of this is percentage. So import custom facilities is a percentage, insurance is a percentage, and it's actually a 5% over my $250,000 here. So once I have created these purchase orders, forwarded them to my suppliers, the next thing that will happen is that my supplier will inform me that the goods are ready to be shipped. So then we get into shipments. A shipment is there to manage one or several purchase orders from one supplier or from different suppliers. So I can use shipments to signify that I'm going to consolidate various purchase orders. It's also there for delivery progress tracking. This is what I'm going to be using, that the vehicle for me to check what's coming. And I'll also be able to keep documents such as bill of lading. So what I want is I want to have all information concerning a shipment in the same spot rather than having things disseminated on my server, for instance. And it will assemble all costs for landed costing. So again, what we saw at purchase order level, it's going to sum up everything concerning all the purchase order lines that end up in that shipment, whether they're coming from one or several suppliers, whether one supplier is Ex Works and the other one is FOB. There are two optional steps when I'm creating these shipments. One is the voyage or the transport. So in that transport, I'll be able to describe a particular voyage. That's my voyage number from Shanghai to Sydney. This is the freight forwarder that I'm using, Schneider National Lines. It's a transport mode, by sea, and the departure place and country. Same thing for the destination, and my expected departure date and expected arrival date. So I can store that, ahead of time before I create my shipment. The other optional step is containers. So if I want to be able to follow what's happening container by container, and I can see that here I've got the container identifier, and I can move, purchase orders. You can see here I've got an order selection possibility, and I can decide, what I'm going to add to my container here. So I've got one, purchase order, 2 lines that I've put into my container. I can see that at this stage, the container is 50% full, because the table in the background knows what the capacity of a 20-foot container is, and looking at the items that I've put in there so far, I'm at 15%. So I can fill up my container that way. If I do not need this level of detail, I can proceed directly to the shipments without the transport, without the freight containers. Let's have a look at a shipment. This is my main screen for my shipment. The system has allocated a shipment number. There's also a shipment ID, and we'll come to that in a minute. This is optional, but I've used it in a particular way that I'll describe. What is the ship date, whether it's been shipped, or not. We find the container capacity area as well. And here I can fill up that information. If I didn't have transport, the transport record, I can describe here, who the carrier is going to be, the mode of transport, the departure place, and the dates. Next item is lines. So in this particular case, we can see that here the management is by purchase order lines instead of being by container. I didn't go through the process of creating container records and attaching purchase orders to containers. I'm going to attach orders directly, and you can see here I've got either a selection of purchase orders or I've got a selection of containers to attach to my shipment. So here I've attached only one order, and my freight container area is empty. To show you an example of a shipment with containers. So in this case, I had 2 containers. You see the container identification here and all the lines. What we can see here as well is that we have a number of different suppliers. So I've got first supplier here, a second supplier here, and a third supplier. So I'm consolidating in this particular instance. And we can also see that I have multiple purchase orders, even for the same supplier. I've got supplier Shusheng here, and we have 2 different purchase orders that we've consolidated. Sorry, purchase orders here. 64, 65, 67, and then that last purchase order here. Let's return to our original shipment. As indicated before, I've got my total costs here for all the lines, all the containers that I've added to my shipment, and the same thing by nature that we saw before at purchase order level. Next thing is attaching documents. So in this case here, I've got a bill of lading. And the other thing that I'll be able to do in that, there's my bill of lading. So I've attached an external document, just like everywhere in Sage X3. I can attach whatever soft copy document I want. And the other thing that I have here is a process. And if I do that on a regular basis, I can use a template to load all these different steps. So this is to assist people that are managing shipments, particularly if you have someone new, or if you have someone replacing someone else whilst they're on leave. It's a good idea to have a process. So first I have to arrange delivery to the forwarder, confirm the delivery. So and due dates, dependencies, I cannot do this one until I've done the one before, and which task are completed and which ones are not. And I can use the alerts in Sage X3 to remind me of upcoming tasks that I need to do. Now the bottom part of my shipment here is, this is not standard Sage X3. I've put it here to demonstrate how you can expand on functionality by calling external APIs within Sage X3 without coding. I'm not a programmer. I was just using the tools provided with Sage X3 to do that. So if I expand on that, and remember that shipment ID, so this is the vessel identifier. And on the net, there are different websites allowing you to do vessel tracking. I've picked one of those here. And if you expand, I can see that this vessel is actually on its way to Australia from Taiwan or from China, but at the moment this is where it is. And you can get additional information about this particular vessel. Okay, so show detail is what I was looking for. So this is this particular vessel. That's his MMSI, so the identifier of the vessel, and where it is at the moment. So it left Taiwan, and it will reach Melbourne on the 12th of January. So you can see the time that is left for it to reach the destination. The way I did that, just very briefly, using the tools in the development area, I created a new screen called Shipment Map, and using again the standard functionality, I passed the parameter MMSI, and there's the URL. So this is the website that I found to like a common website to track ship, and I've passed my shipment ID as a parameter in order to retrieve the right vessel. Next is shipment receipt. So I'm going to do a new shipment receipt, and here I can receipt. Well, this is using the purchase order receipt, and you can see here, I can select orders to receipt. Today we're talking about shipments, and it could be I'm receiving a shipment or I'm receiving by container, which is another option. Maybe the containers got separated from the entire shipment, and 2 containers arrive, and then another 2 are still at port or in transit, and you'd like to be able to receive by container. So received by shipment. Again, I have a list of my shipments here, and I can see I can expand to have the lines. So maybe I'm not receiving everything, but in this case, I'll say that I'm selecting all the lines, and then I can obviously change the quantities. I could do that on a mobile device as well. You notice that there's also an option of shipment pre-receipt. So this is working in a similar way, but it's not actually putting things in stock. This is an option that you can use when your supplier has informed you of changes in dates, changes in quantities. And ahead of time, you can start making adjustments to your shipment. So when the receiving team ends up receiving this shipment, they'll have up-to-date information. So if I go to my lines here, I can see, say, shipped quantity and pre-received quantity. So I can make these changes in the expected receipt date. So advanced shipping information. My last step is going to be invoices. So in this area, we have 2 types of invoices. We have an invoice for the goods, of course, from my supplier. And I also need to factor in invoices that I'm going to receive from my freight forwarders. And for that, I don't have a purchase order. So Sage X3 will have to have a way to handle these so that I can attach external invoices to my shipments. Know that in this case, I've put my invoices straight after shipment. Sometimes you receive an invoice long before the shipment arrives, and you have to effect payment long before the shipment arrives. So that's also something that Sage actually can handle. You'll be able to enter invoices against a purchase order without a receipt having taken place yet. So let's start with the goods invoice. So I'm going to create a brand new invoice, and the difference between these 2 types of invoices is going to be here. As it says, invoice type. The first thing that I'm going to do is to enter a regular invoice. So this is from my supplier, Shanghai Eagle. There's 2 suppliers, so that's the one that I want. what is my invoice number, and then nothing really special here is I'll be able to pick an order, and it's my order 55, same thing. It might have been a invoice for part of the purchase order, but in this case, I'll say that I was invoice for the whole lot. You can see that the invoice is in currency, of course, of the supplier. So pretty straightforward entry of an invoice here. Let's see how we enter the second type of invoice. So this is a supplementary invoice or additional invoice. My supplier, so I don't have a purchase order this time, and my supplier is a logistics company. Think Global Logistics. I'm going to enter an invoice number. And I'm going to go into lines. So as I said, in this case, I cannot select a purchase order. So there is a special function here to preload lines and retrieve information either by receipt, order, or shipment. So we're going to do that. And it's my shipment 42. So it's narrowing down, but you could be looking at the transport, the voyage number, the quantity, a particular product, or a shipment ID, that vessel number that we saw before. So on the right-hand side here, I'm entering a freight invoice. It's the container charge. And the next field is important. If I have described that container charge already in my budgetary figures before, it's not going to be a new cost. I'll only tick that when I have something that was unforeseen, a new charge that I hadn't planned, and I need to add that to the total cost of my shipment. So I'll undo that. And I'll find my sea freight charge, and I'll say that it applies to the entire shipment. Press OK. And what the system has done is that it's apportioned $3,200 based on the pro rata value of each line. So I've got 1280, 1920 in a portion to each line. Let's have a look to see if we had done it differently. So I'm going to delete what we've done so far and start again by preloading the lines. Here's my shipment 42, my $3,200 freight charge for the container. I'm assigning that. And what's going to happen is whenever I put this particular charge, it's going to adjust what has been done before. So if I had a $3,000 estimate, that was just an estimate. What I'm doing here is I'm putting the actual charge. And last time we distributed that pro rata, and now we're going to do it by weight, and we'll see the difference. So I'll just assign this entire shipment, and I'll say OK. And you can see that the apportionment is vastly different because this time it's based on the weight. So after this step of entering invoices, a background task will make all the necessary adjustment to the item cost in stock and across all transactions. So far they had been entered using budgetary figures, using the cost structure. This time we have actual cost, so there might be a need for an adjustment for all these transactions that happen between the receipt and the entry of these ancillary invoices today.